The final section of external evidence is to look at how well the New Testament coheres and fits with the rest of ancient history. When this evidence piles up, it easily refutes to claim the New Testament was written by later forgers, and demonstrates the Gospel writers were intimately familiar with the culture they were writing about. For example, in Matthew 17, Jesus is approached by Peter to pay a temple tax of 2 drachma. Jesus teaches him a lesson and tells him where he can find the amount for himself and Jesus to pay the tax. Peter goes to the sea and finds a shekel, which in ancient Rome was equal to 4 drachma. Thus Matthew records the appropriate currency exchange, that 1 shekel is equal to 4 drachma. Now why is this important? Because it's an example they knew what they were talking about. If I told you to tell me the proper currency exchange in Mexico 80 years ago, could you do it? And remember, you must do it without modern technology, like the internet or extensive libraries. The odds are very slim. In the same way, when the Gospel writers get details like this, it matters. Because if they were written by later forgers, after the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, which dramatically changed the culture, they would make numerous errors and demonstrate they were not part of that culture, but later frauds. A good example is Philostratus' life of Apollonius. Philostratus, writing around 200 AD, attempts to make up the life of a sage from the 1st century, and utterly fails. Scholars recognize dozens of errors which show the mark of a later forger, such as having Apollonius talk with kings in Babylon, yet in the 1st century Babylon was still in ruins. His trip to India is completely incompatible with known facts. Most scholars recognize that Apollonius is a made-up pagan sage based on Jesus, and is meant to give the pagans their own miracle worker. So if the Gospels were written by later forgers, it would be easy for them to mix up facts and show they were not organically part of 1st century Palestine and Greece, like how Philostratus wasn't. However, we find over and over again that the New Testament writers get facts correct constantly, demonstrating they were intimately familiar with the culture of that time. To show how much they got right, Nathaniel Lardner wrote Credibility of the Gospel History, which documents detail after detail of what the New Testament authors got right. However, it's 17 volumes long, so the amount of details they got right is unprecedented. That doesn't happen if you're a later forger, like the tale of Apollonius demonstrates. And writing about 1st century Judea is no cakewalk. Just look at how the governance changed. First, Herod the Great ruled a united kingdom, but then his kingdom is divided between 3 sons. Archelaus is never certified as king, but is allowed to reign. Then Archelaus is removed, and Judea is reduced to a Roman province, run by prefects. But the religious leaders are still allowed some role in military power. However, in 36 AD, Pilate is removed, and replaced with others, which lasts until Herod Agrippa is given kingship of the region. He lasts a few years and then dies, and is replaced by a system of procurators. However, Herod Agrippa II later is given some power in Judea, but it is limited. The whole issue is very confusing, and has befuddled even some Roman historians. However, the Gospel writers tiptoe easily through this political mess, where it is easy to make a mistake and show you have no clue what you're talking about. Yet they constantly get the changes in government correct, even up to the point of saying Archelaus was not a king, but only reigning as one. A later forger would have likely messed this up. Another good point is the issue of crucifixion and burial. The depiction of Jesus' crucifixion correlates to known facts about it, such as carrying one's cross and being nailed to it. Many skeptics used to think the Gospels were wrong in their depiction of someone being nailed to a cross. However, in 1968, an ossuary was found containing the burial remains of a Jewish man named Yohanan, containing a 7-inch nail driven through both his feet. His legs were also crushed, confirming the practice of breaking the victim's legs. Skeptics like Dale Martin have tried to argue Jesus wouldn't have been allowed to be given a proper burial. However, the fact that Yohanan was given one challenges this claim. Josephus also tells us that prior to 70 AD, crucified victims were allowed to be given a proper burial. Thus, the biblical description of crucifixion and burial fits well with what the historical record tells us. In the book Jesus and the Eyewitnesses, Richard Bauckham compares the amount of names used in the Gospels with that of what we found on ancient Palestinian gravestones, ancient records, and on ossuaries. He finds the ratio of names in the Gospels correlates almost perfectly to the ratio of names the rest of the historical record reveals. In both cases, Simon and Joseph are the most popular male names. The other 9 most popular male names correlate as well. The 2 most popular female names, Mary and Salome, and the other 9 most popular female names correlate almost as close as well. Thus it seems remarkable if the Gospels were written by later forgers, they coincidentally got the use of name percentages right as well. It fits far better with the fact that they were actually writing about events in a culture they were eyewitnesses to. Otherwise, these facts would not be piling up one after another. This can be seen in what Colin Hemmer does. He lists 84 facts the book of Acts gets right in its final 16 chapters. And when you look at the facts it gets right, it shows Luke was very familiar with the culture and knows what he was talking about. Luke gets the proper names of ports, local industries of certain regions, the proper lines of boundaries, slang terminology, specific landmarks, local variations in languages, and the proper titles for regional and local officials. For example, he knows the governor of Cyprus is called a proconsul, while in Philippi they are referred to as governors. Meanwhile in Thessalonica they are referred to as politarchs or rulers. In Ephesus, the chief magistrate is called the town clerk. The ruler in Malta is called the chief man. In Athens, Areopagites is a title for a member of their court, and so on and so on. You do not get this kind of accuracy unless you are very familiar with what actually took place, and you do not get that unless you are or work directly for the eyewitnesses of the events. Craig Bloomberg does the same with the book of John and lists 59 facts John gets right about ancient Judea. And there is still Lardner's 17-volume work waiting for you if you want to see the overwhelming amount of facts they get right, which is way too much to list here. However, my research partner was nice enough to pull the 41 facts William Paley lists in his book, which is the cliff notes on Lardner's work, and we place them in a blog post below so you can go through them and see the overwhelming amount of facts they get right. All of this just piles up to show the New Testament writers knew what they were talking about, and over again they got their facts right, affirming the reliability of the New Testament. The external facts and archaeological discoveries constantly confirm the biblical account in almost every way. The evidence once again affirms the New Testament is a reliable document.